Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're tracing the history of the world's very first potato chip. Let's jump straight into the video.
Today, we are going to unpack a truly wild culinary journey. We're going to uncover exactly how a once illegal, deeply misunderstood little tuber was completely transformed by a handful of visionary underdogs into a massive, globe-spanning snacking empire. It's an incredible story of culinary rebellion, ingenious inventions, and honestly, some absolutely brilliant marketing.
Let's kick things off with a number that is, well, it's frankly staggering. 5 trillion. Today, humans consume an astonishing 5 trillion individual potato chips every single year. To put that into perspective, that equates to more than 600 chips for every man, woman, and child on Earth. It firmly establishes the potato chip as the world's absolute favorite snack. But, as we'll see, the path to 5 trillion was anything but guaranteed.
Section 1. The potato's rocky start. Okay, to really understand this, we need to trace the core ingredient, the humble potato, all the way back to its roots. Wild potatoes were likely being cultivated in what is now Peru, around 10,000 years ago, way before they ever reached European shores. Now, for thousands of years, this noble root was a vital staple, but its introduction to the rest of the world, it was incredibly rocky. When the Spanish first encountered potatoes in 1537 and brought them back to Europe, they were widely despised. Because they grew underground, people considered them ungodly. The public falsely believed they were poisonous and could even cause leprosy. This fear was so intense that in 1748, France actually passed a law making it literally illegal to cultivate potatoes. They remained outlawed for decades. People rejected the vegetable with absolute fury, literally shouting that it was going to poison them. So how do you fix a reputation that bad? Well, to overcome this intense dread and get the 1772 ban repealed, a French pharmacist and agronomist named Antoine-Augustin Parmentier had to pull off some epic PR stunts. He hosted these lavish potato-themed dinners for elites like Benjamin Franklin. But his most brilliant move? He planted potatoes under a heavily armed guard. Then he intentionally sent the guards away at night. Naturally, curious local peasants assumed the crop must be incredibly valuable, so they snuck in and stole them. It was reverse psychology at its finest.
Section 2. The Saratoga Chip Myth.
Now let's cross the Atlantic to 19th century America, where the chip as we know it began to take shape. But much like the potato itself, the origin story of the potato chip is clouded by some very persistent culinary legends. You've probably heard the famous 1853 myth, right? The one where a chef named George Crumb was supposedly annoyed by shipping tycoon Cornelius Vanderbilt, who kept sending his potatoes back for being too thick. In a fit of petty revenge, Crumb allegedly sliced them paper thin, fried them crisp, dumped salt on them, and oops, accidentally invented the potato chip. It's a fantastic story. But Vanderbilt wasn't even there. In fact, potato recipes closely resembling chips existed as early as 1557 by a chef named Lancelot de Casteau, who eventually published them in a 1604 cookbook.
And that brilliantly illustrates the true origin of their massive popularity in America. Carrie D. Moon's Lake House in Saratoga Springs. During the 1850s to the 1870s, Moon's restaurant actually turned these Saratoga chips into a high-end delicacy. This painstakingly detailed 1870 recipe shows them soaking the starch out of the potatoes for hours until the slice was practically transparent, drying them perfectly, and then frying them in hot lard. They were an absolute hit, adored by epicures and famous restaurateurs like Lorenzo Delmonico, who immediately snatched up the idea and added them to his own iconic menus.
Section 3. The Packaging Revolution. So how exactly did a high-end restaurant delicacy become a ubiquitous everyday snack? Well, by 1895, an entrepreneur named William Tappenden moved chips out of restaurants and began mass-producing them for grocery stores. However, the snack immediately faced a massive physical hurdle that stopped it from going national. The crucial point here is that early distribution was, frankly, terrible. Back then, chips were scooped from large bins, tins, or barrels in the store and just popped into a bag for the customer. Think about that for a second. The chips at the bottom of these barrels routinely ended up totally crushed and completely stale. Because they just didn't travel well, chips had to remain a strictly regional product. That is, until a brilliant woman stepped in and changed the entire industry forever.
Enter Laura Scudder in 1926. She was actually the first female attorney in Ukiah, California, and she started kettle frying chips at her gas station in Monterey Park. But she flat out refused to sell them in bulk. Instead, she invented an absolutely ingenious airtight packaging method. She had her employees hand iron sheets of wax paper into little pouches, fill them with chips, and then iron the final side shut. It was simple, but it guaranteed perfect freshness and durability.
Scudder was a true trailblazer. For instance, she instituted the first ever freshness dates on her food products. When chip sales naturally dropped off in the winter, she expanded into peanut butter and mayonnaise just to ensure her staff stayed employed year-round. She even had to overcome blatant sexism in the business world, eventually finding a female insurance agent to cover her massive 300-truck delivery fleet when all the male agents completely refused. And through it all, she aggressively marketed her brand using this incredibly catchy slogan, "The noisiest chips in the world." Section 4. Building a global snack. With the freshness and distribution problem finally solved by Laura Scudder's airtight bags, mid-20th century entrepreneurs stepped on the gas. They took this regional treat and built massive, multi-million-dollar snack empires. Just look at Herman Lay. In 1932, as a 23-year-old traveling salesman, he started selling potato chips out of the trunk of his car in Nashville. His rapid expansion was nothing short of incredible. By 1944, he formally named the company Lay's Potato Chips. By 1961, he merged with the Frito Company, and just 4 years after that, merged with Pepsi-Cola to form PepsiCo. He literally took a trunk business to a global conglomerate in just a few decades.
Today, the sheer scale of Lay's is almost unbelievable. They source from about 100 different farms to process an astounding 4 billion pounds of potatoes every single year. And thanks to hyper-efficient modern manufacturing, it takes just 20 minutes for a raw potato to come off a truck, be sliced, cooked, seasoned, sealed, and packed, ready for you to eat. 20 minutes.
Section 5. The Flavor Explosion.
As manufacturing scaled up globally, these massive snack companies quickly realized something super important. You can't just sell one single product to everyone. They needed to appeal to entirely diverse palates all around the world. It was time for a flavor explosion. But what's truly surprising is that for a very long time, chips were completely unseasoned, plain potato. It wasn't until 1920 that Frank Smith, founder of Smith's Crisps in the UK, started including little blue twists of salt right in his bags. But the real game changer? That happened in 1954, when Joe Spud Murphy, owner of the Irish company Tayto, successfully pioneered the first truly flavored chip, cheese and onion. Barbecue followed in the US shortly after.
As flavor technology grew, it really began to showcase some fascinating cultural divides. For example, just look at the difference between the US and Canada. American consumers heavily favor creamier tastes, think Cool Ranch or sweet barbecue. Canadians, on the other hand, heavily influenced by their ties to the United Kingdom, strongly prefer vinegar-forward profiles. Up in Canada, putting white vinegar on your French fries is standard practice, and that laid the groundwork for a very unique snack. And this exact cultural divide gave birth to the legendary ketchup chip. Introduced in the 1970s by Hostess and American companies like Hare's, the ketchup chip is a tangy, sweet blend meant to mimic cooked tomatoes and vinegar. Now, while it largely failed to take off in the US market, it completely exploded in Canada. Today, millions of bags are produced annually, and they are so deeply ingrained in Canadian identity that American tourists have gone viral just for driving across the border to buy cases of them.
Section 6. Billions of chips today.
So here we are in the modern era, where the definition of a potato chip has become so incredibly colossal and the financial stakes are so unbelievably high that the very concept of the chip has actually ended up in a court of law. I am not kidding. In a rather hilarious 2009 legal battle in the UK, Pringles, which are basically made from an extruded dough of potato, wheat, and corn, tried to argue in court that their hyperbolic paraboloid shapes actually lacked a sufficient quality of potato-ness. Seriously, potato-ness. Why would they do that? Because if they weren't legally crisps, they wouldn't be subject to a 20% sales tax. Ultimately, the judges rejected this philosophical argument, ruling that any reasonable man on the street would call them crisps, making them legally taxable.
And that legal definition really matters when you look at the bottom line. The global potato chip industry today generates an awe-inspiring $50 billion in sales annually. We are talking about 5 million tons of product flying off the shelves globally every single year.
The incredible journey of the potato chip is proof that relentless visionaries, from an agronomist like Parmentier guarding his crops in the dead of night to Laura Scudder ironing wax paper bags at her gas station, can truly change the world. They took an outlawed, feared route and built a 5 trillion chip empire. It leaves us to wonder, as our global tastes continue to evolve, what crazy, boundary-pushing flavor innovation is coming next. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you found it as deliciously fascinating as I did.